Okay, my name is Brigham Elton. I am a pornography and sexual addiction counselor, but I am not a therapist. Like, I'm not a social worker. Like, I don't have a master's in any of that stuff. Like, this was not my life plan, you know? Like, when I was in high school, it wasn't like, oh, yeah, I want to work in the porn industry, you know? Like, that really wasn't my plan, like, at all, you know? But it just kind of, like, kept falling onto me, you know? And I ended up working at this, like, treatment center and developing a sexual program for them, and that just took off. And now, like, I've had like six or seven different therapists work for me. My company's called True Connections, and we help people to overcome pornography. And like, our goal is not just like don't use; it's like overcome the appeal of pornography as a whole. I help individuals overcome sexual abuse. I help individuals overcome like sexual fear. Like, especially here in Utah, we have this like sexual fear culture, and we overcome like all of these different things with the exact same chase, like chasing a healthy view of sexuality. Like, that's our goal. Like, if we chase healthy sex, then like all three of those things can be overcome. And so as we like talk today, we're going to be talking a lot about like what are the messages of our sexual climate, what's being taught around us, and then like what actually is healthy sexuality, and how can we support our kids or those individuals that we love to actually chase healthy sexuality. As we do this today, I kind of like to teach in a very specific way, where I like to kind of have like moments of lecture, like 5 to 7 minutes, where even if you raise your hand, I'm going to point at you and be like, okay, great, you've got a question, but I'm not going to stop, right? And then I like you to kind of digest this with your peers and the people that also chose to come today. And so, very first, I want you to meet someone sitting next to you that doesn't live under the same roof. And I would like you to learn from them. If they died and were reincarnated, let's say that like the Buddhists got it right and we're all getting reincarnated as animals, what animal would they deserve to be? Not what animal do you want to be, because then the right answer would all be an orca, right? But what animal do you actually deserve to be, right? Because of the way that you've lived, or whatever you think you deserve it. Go ahead and meet someone, or else I'll know you don't have any friends. Ready, set, go. Zero. Okay, welcome back. Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Like, I hope it gets loud every time that we do something like that, you know? Cool. Um, Pornography is now the primary sexual educator, like far and away, like it's not even close, for individuals underneath the age of 40, right? This is the main place that individuals are learning what sex is. That's like, hey, welcome to Driver's Ed. Let's watch Fast and Furious. This is how you drive a car, you know? Like, there's so many inaccuracies, but this is like, pornography has become the primary dictator of our sexual climate, right? Which is just kind of unbelievable. There's a bunch of reasons why, right? One of those reasons why is like first exposure. Like, people remember their very first thing, and that has a big imprint on them on what is real and what is not. This is true about all sorts of different things, but as soon as we learn it for the very first time, that first connection is very hard for us to rewire, right? First exposure in 1998 for boys was on average 14.7 years old, right? And for girls, those who actually were exposed, because not all girls were exposed back then, but on average it was like 17-ish years old, right? And then these individuals wouldn't actually go looking for pornography for usually about 2 years. So like the average age of looking, like seeking pornography on their own in 1998 was like 16.7 years old, right? And for girls, it was like 23, right? And so like that has totally changed. In 2018, the average age for a boy running into pornography, being exposed to pornography, was 8.1 years old. And for a girl, we're talking like 10.1, right? And again, like 2018 is now 5 years ago, you know? And it's not like screens have shown up less in our lives since then, you know? Like, especially with COVID, like when 2020 hit, pornography traffic went up 62% during that COVID time, right? And like, I am still like constantly seeing clients who were affected by the COVID shutdown using screens for all my connections, which also became their sexual connection, right? Like, that has totally shifted the landscape, right? Where this is where individuals are having their first exposure to sex is pornography, right? The average age of going seeking pornography now for boys, it's only 6 months after their first exposure. So we're looking at like 8.7 years old. So just over 8.5. Like I have clients, I've had multiple clients who are all under 8 years old, like a 6-year-old client right now, right? Who like is consistently using pornography, right? And like his parents like made a real effort, you know? Like they kept their iPads locked up or whatever. He found an old phone and then was using it, right? And like, yeah, it's sad, it's heartbreaking, but like that's kind of the world that we live in now. Like as we bring access to everything into our homes, which can be freaking awesome, we also bring access to for everything into our homes, right? Um, this also like where let's talk a little bit about access, right? Like if you're actually going to have sex with a real life person, like what are you going to have to do? Wow, look at this. I'm picking on you, I guess. If you're going to have sex with a real person, what has to happen? Yeah, you have to like actually have some type of relationship, right? It's going to take a little bit of work, right? Like even if you're going to get a prostitute, it's not like you get a prostitute and you just walk in and start banging it out. Like that's not what happens, right? Like you meet this person, you have an interaction, you at least like worked and paid and got a contact with this person. Like that's bare minimum, right? Like sex is something that is worked for, it is invested in, it's something that is built, right? And if you look at like pornography previous to like the internet being fast enough to stream pornography videos, so this is like pretty much previous to 2008 is when YouTube and YouPorn really got growing. YouPorn became Pornhub and it split up, but whatever, right? Like if you were going to access pornography previous to watching it on the internet, you could download pictures, right? Or else you went to and got these things, which I have to explain to kids what these are, you know? We'd go to get these like VHSs, right? And you would go to this like Blockbuster, which you guys never had a Blockbuster because I graduated in 2008 and we used to play Wasatch in high school and I remember what Heber was like back then, right? But like you guys had like some Ma and Pa Blockbuster, you know, and then in the back they had probably this creepy beaded curtain and you would go through that creepy beaded curtain and there was your like adult films and if you tried to check it out they'd be like, are you 18 years old? You know? But like even back then getting porn took work. You'd have to maybe steal your uncle's Playboy from his gym bag or whatever, you know? But like now, if you're going to access pornography, it is just constantly available. It is on tap. You can have it whenever you want. Now, here is a pinnacle of life. Like sex is a pinnacle of life. And here is a pinnacle of life that is available for nothing. Like you don't have to do anything for it. Literally, you have to like move your fingers a little bit, you know? And all of a sudden you're experiencing a pinnacle of life. Like think about what animals do in order to have sex, you know? Like elk sit there and like grow up as men for years and then start beating each other with their antlers and then eventually maybe they can get their own little harem or whatever, you know? But sex is something that is earned, worked for, chased. And yet youth and those who are being taught what sex is by pornography are being taught that sex is available now. Your timetable, get yours when you want. Cool. Novelty. Previous, again, to like the internet having this unlimited supply of pornography for you, individuals had pornography like stashes. And again, for some reason, everybody's uncle hid it in their gym bag or underneath their mattress, you know? And like, great hiding spot if everyone does it, you know? And like, but you had the like pornography that you owned, you know? And you would have your 10 to 20 different things and you could watch those things, but you kind of had a relationship with your porn a little bit. And it was semi consistent, right? Pornography now in 2019, 169 years of new footage was uploaded just to Pornhub. It would literally be impossible for you to watch all the porn on the internet. Impossible. And this can constantly thrive. Man, I need to change colors. This can constantly thrive on overstimulation. Like new. It's like this TikTok media, right? You guys know what TikTok is, right? Okay, like some head nods with TikTok, right? Or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, whatever. Everybody's doing it now, right? But it's these like 15-second videos that like just for a second try to hold in your attention and then you can just move on to something else. And porn has become like that, where it's just like new, shock, thrill, overstimulate, so that your brain never goes like, what am I doing? Your brain's just constantly, what's next? And it becomes this dopamine overload because dopamine is a chasing something drug, right? And then we just constantly chase. Next thing you know, we've had an orgasm and we're going like, what in the crap did I just do? Right? And like, that's the way that people are experiencing this now with this like crazy overstimulation when like real actual sex is very Patternistic. This is why I write in cursive, because then no one knows if I spell correctly, right? But sex is like very patternistic, right? Like if I was going to tell you how sex was with my wife, I could pretty much draw the whole thing out for you, and it's almost exactly like that every single time, you know? And it's very much down the pattern. And our sex life is not surviving off of new shocking thrill. Our sex life is being fueled by like emotional, spiritual, mental, physical, recreational intimacy. But actually using intimacy instead of newness to fuel something is like shocking for our youth sometimes, you know? Cool, let's talk a little bit more about that overstimulating way. When an individual watches pornography now, they average 10 minutes in Utah. And in those 10 minutes, they average 7 different clips. They'll watch the first clip that they run into. I'm switching colors like I said I would. For a little bit. And then as soon as they get bored, there's already these other clips on the side. And if your internet's fast enough, those are already playing in like GIF mode, whatever, GIF or GIF, whatever you're supposed to call it. And then they just keep switching, and overstimulating their brain and getting more and more, just boom, 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 boom. Right? Again, so much different than just like, let's just compare like 1990s porn, right? Like 1990s porn, they would tell these dumb stories, like terrible stories, but they would tell these stories and then have these like sexual escapades, and they would be like movies. You know, like Sylvester Stallone, who again, I have to explain to your kids who Sylvester Stallone is. Do you feel old yet? Because I heard you were ancient today. Yeah, right? But like, he started as a porn actor, right? And he would play some dumb character in a porn video, which they eventually renamed as the Italian Stallion. Good marketing, right? And then he would pretend to be somebody, and then they would have this affair, right? But it would fake a story of connection, at least fake connection. But now it's not like even porn stars even pretend to be anything. They just have their like porn names, and they just like do the act of sex. There's not really even any buildup anymore. It's just like have the act of sex right now. Overstimulate, overstimulate, overstimulate. This has led to a new issue that started to be studied in about 2015 called pornography-induced erectile dysfunction. This is happening to about 42% of individuals between ages of 15 and 30 in the United States. This is happening all over. There's studies from like Switzerland, there's studies from England, there's studies from Canada, and they're all between like 30 and 50%, right? Where like an individual who is 15 freaking years old tries to have sexual intercourse with someone, and they cannot get enough blood flow to their penis because their brain is going, this isn't what sex is. This all comes down to the way that someone perceives sex. It's not like they're physically having an issue, like their blood is not pumping enough, their heart is not pumping enough blood to their penis. This is that their brain is going, this isn't what sex is. They're expecting this experience. And when sex actually has like some rejection or some awkwardness or some like, I'm in the mood, but you're not, then their bodies aren't responding because they're like, wait, this isn't what sex is. Sex is with a screen. And then they'll go and they'll grab their computer and they'll open their computer back up, but now not their computer, their phone computer, because that's what they carry now, right? But they'll open their phone back up and all of a sudden they can get an erection again because their brain's like, this means sex. The reason we mainly go over this is like, yeah, it's important for you to be aware of what's going on in pornography, but if you didn't already think that pornography was an issue, you wouldn't have came today, you know? It's like you knew that pornography was an issue, or else you wouldn't have shown up here, you know? But what I want you to see here is that the reason that pornography is dangerous is because it shifts our perception of what sex is, what relationships are, and who I am. This starts to really over-sexualize who I think I am as a human and my worth. My worth starts to become what I can give sexually, right? And it's interesting to me and amazing and also really heartbreaking to see how much pornography can shift someone's view of themselves and make them question, who am I, on a wholly deeper level, right? And it's that who am I question is so stinking hard. Like we've all gone through it, you know? But who am I now is way harder than it's ever been. Who am I now also includes like, who am I attracted to? What is my gender? Like, who do I want to be? It's like so many stinking things now. And this who am I question can really shake someone right to their core. Cool. Thank you. I would like you to tell your neighbor what stood out to you so far. And then we're going to start back up in about 32 and a half seconds. Ready, set, go. when we take these little breaks, this is like the best time for you to ask a question. So if you have like a question, like when we take these little breaks, raise your hand. I'll come around, and if your question is a group question, then great, I'll hear it, and then we'll talk about it as a group. If it's an individual question, like that's the best time for us to get it answered, right? I teach these like 8-week courses for parents about how to talk to your kids about sex, and we're going to do pieces of that today. But obviously, it's going to be like a fire hose, and so like our ability to have like a lot of back and forth questions is going to be small, right? Cool. I want to fly through this. I hate going through this sometimes, but I think it's important to understand like how pornography content has changed, right? So this is the pornography perversion charts. It's important to define the word perversion, right? Like you could pervert the game of soccer by just making it like everything like off norm, or you could call it football. That would pervert it already, right? But like right? Like if you let everyone on defense use their hands, right, you've perverted the game of soccer, right? It just means it's anything off norm. This is the typical pornography progression that we've seen. First is individuals start with like YouTube pornography, right? It has no actual nudity in it. This could be on like TikTok or like Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and it will like let you can look at this stuff and it won't actually like flag it and take it off, right? Or like PG-13 movies or like Sports Illustrated magazines. Like this is the most common starting point. It doesn't actually show like vulvas, which is a woman's crotch naked, even though everyone calls it a vagina. It's technically a vulva. Vulvas, penises, testicles, nipples, or anuses, right? Like it's not allowed to show any of those things. And this is again a very, very common starting point. But then people progress to level 2 pornography. So level 2 pornography is what is defined as a healthy depiction of what sex is, which means that it's showing that it is consensual. It's showing that it's in a relationship that has equality, that's in a relationship of respect where they follow each other's boundaries, and it's in a relationship of trust where both people know where the relationship stands. I've not watched all the porn on the internet, but no kid that I talk to watches this. And so for most of the time, we go from like level 1 and then jump to level 3 pornography. Parents call this type of pornography softcore pornography. Kids don't use that term anymore, but like that's what parents sometimes call it, right? This is then they call it like minor perversion. So like anything outside your sexual orientation. So if you're a dude and you plan on staying a dude and you're watching lesbian pornography, which is the number one type of pornography in the United States, that would be a perversion of what sex is for you, right? With group, anything with more than 2 people. Oral sex can exist in healthy sex, but 68% of heterosexual pornography has a man ejaculating on a woman's face or in her mouth. And so that's not where semen goes. And so that's a perversion of what sex is. Anime, you're never going to have sex with a cartoon. And so that's a perversion of what sex is. Anime in 2020 and 2021 was the number one type of pornography in the United States. It's been the number one type of pornography in the world for a long time. But it's starting to become the number one type of pornography in the United States. Even like it's not porn on Fortnite, but it's like Fortnite characters, right? Like that type of character, or Minecraft, or like Apex Legends or whatever, and like they are now being sexualized and turned into pornography, right? Like I freaking love the game Zelda, and they've even messed up the game Zelda. Like what the heck, people, back off. Is anything sacred anymore? Come on, right? So let's talk a little bit about level 3 pornography. Let's go through some of these numbers because I think these numbers are helpful. What percent of individuals have sought at least level 3 pornography before or equal to, this is like my math test, the age of 18, right? And we're going to start here with men. What percentage of men have sought pornography before the age of 18? 96%. This has been above 90 for like over 10 years, right? What percent of women have sought pornography before, underneath, or before the age or equal to the age of 18? This is in Utah, right? And in Utah, this is 62%. What percent of individuals are using pornography between the ages of 15 and 30? This means at least twice a month. That's the bare minimum of using. For men, which will stay with red because we started with red. For men, this is about 84%. This has been in the 80s, like below 86 for, again, since like 2008. It's been right in that. Like pornography is actually kind of given up on like marketing to men a little bit because they're like, we've tapped out this market. Let's start like aiming at women more, right? For women, 52%. Right, and again, that's from Utah. Like half of my clients right now that are single are women. After marriage, like that does change, right? Like my percentage of client does change. But like before that, like this is not just a male thing, right? And I think sometimes we can isolate people by treating it just as a male thing because it's not like that anymore. Like it really is reaching both directions. Then we move to non-consensual pornography. Non-consensual pornography is non-consensual, right? There's a bunch of different reasons why something would be non-consensual. One would be like someone saying no. This includes like bondage pornography, or like I hate even writing this term, but soft no pornography. Yeah. Number two would be like age difference, which a lot of times starts with teen level stuff. Number three would be someone who's impaired. This would include like the most common one right now is someone who's asleep. Four would be like bestiality. This is actually like one of the ones that has the most. I forgot where the T's are. Bestiality. Whatever, you get it. There's too many, right? Okay, whatever. Who cares? This like bestiality thing, right? Like this has become really common because it's coming out of the anime lane. Like this, I don't know if you've ever heard of this term, but like this like furry life, like a lot of it comes out of that world. Cool. Then level five is technically on here as well, is incestual, because it's illegal to give your consent to in an incestual relationship, and so that's considered non-consensual. A lot of times this starts with step family, and then it moves to a bunch of different other things. Non-consensual pornography in 2008, 12% of pornography that was produced was non-consensual. In 2017, 24% of pornography was non-consensual. In 2022, 72% of pornography that was produced was non-consensual. This is what I expect now. Like when I talk to a kid about their pornography history, if they're like, "No, I've never run into that," I'm going, "Okay, so you aren't telling me the truth yet," and that's okay. Hopefully, we get there soon, But you aren't quite telling me the truth. This is what, like, if a kid goes to a pornography website and looks at pornography for the very first time, there is a 72% chance that kid is watching non-consensual pornography. That's the world of porn now, right? And as pornography continues to progress this direction, like when I started this company, which wasn't long ago, like only 10 years, like this is where I was telling people, like, go get some therapeutic help, But like now, like this is the norm, And as pornography keeps moving like further and further down, right? This is like where they're making money now. So like this stuff is becoming free and very available, right? Then all types of pornography progresses to violent pornography. Violent pornography, they've had studies that show that like individuals who have watched violent pornography for over 2 years, there's a 70% chance that they're on the sex offenders list. Like that's the kind of world that we're in, right? And then that's where the pornography on the normal internet stops. Then there's like a bunch of other junk on the dark web. If you know what the dark web is, if you ever see a browser that you don't recognize on your computer that's not like Firefox or Chrome, you should be like, uh-oh, that's like a monstrous red flag, right? And then, again, most of these people end up raping or sexually abusing someone. Like, I think we can see that tie. Like, I deal with this constantly. Like, I have to go into, like, the Children's Justice Center down in Provo or whatever consistently because, like, some individual has watched pornography and has watched this, like, soft no pornography where they, like, start kissing someone and someone is saying no, but is still semi-participating. And then at the end, they're like, oh, I'm so grateful. You're a real man. You show me what sex is. And then kids get there with a real first-time intimate experience, and then rape this person because they think that's what that person wants. That this girl is just playing hard to get. And honestly, my heart goes out to this kid a little bit. Because like where in the crap does his boundary come? Does a hedge come to help this kid go that like that's not what sex is? Let us be verbal enough about what actual sex is that kid can't just go through that way thinking like that's how I thought my parents had sex. And to sit there and talk with that kid, I'm like, like we let you down. Because I, as a parent, need to be the sexual educator for my kids. You know what happens at schools when kids get sexual education? They all go like this. And because who wants to be the person paying attention like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a vagina, cool, Like they all go out into left field. They like, yeah, the schools are making efforts, and I've sat in those meetings with health teachers and like tried to make the health curriculum better for schools. But you know what? That's not where it's sticking. Where it's sticking is from you. And obviously you're better because you're here. Like not better, like no one to compare, but like you probably are doing a better job because you're here, But like we need to become the sexual educator for those that we love, right? And be verbal about it, right? And make it something that we can actually talk about. Because when it has this like Utah fear that like I deal with constantly in my job, like man, does that just like everybody. And then in that darkness, pornography is allowed to just like flourish. It's just killing it out there, just making a big bucks, Because a lot of times we won't talk about it enough, Cool. I wasn't even planning on going over this, but I thought it'd be helpful for you guys to understand, like, this is what's going on in the world of pornography. And, like, I held back. I want to tell you that. Like, this is not what all is out there. There's this, like, one little hint at it. There's this big progression now in, like, deep fake stuff where, like, I can download anyone's social media profile and import them into my porn. Any human. If there's pictures of them, I can go download them and watch them in my pornography. Like, that's the world of pornography now. Like they've taken this like however they make like Madden or whatever, and now you can do literally anything. Cool. I see a lot of people taking pictures, which I'm great. You can keep taking pictures if you want. At the end, I'm gonna have you send you your email if you want, and I will email you this PDF, and you'll get like all of the things that I've ever done on the board. Deal? Yeah. Get it? Yeah. Great. Yeah. And again, I'm recording this for a podcast too, and you could like look at the PDF and look at the podcast again. So cool. Anyway, I want to make you successful is the goal, right? Cool. Now that this exists, let's talk about like combating it, right? Like I didn't come here to do like just like despair, doom and gloom, you know? Like I want to talk about like how do we overcome something like this, right? Let me tell you how I watch families and individuals fight pornography, right? You can choose to think about sex in a connection based way or in using an object to get what you want, right? Now here's some kid who wakes up in the morning and he has his phone as his alarm probably, reaches and grabs his phone, opens his phone, what's the first thing he does is he gets on like Instagram, TikTok or whatever, right? And then they'll get this pre-objectified sexual message. Because TikTok's algorithm understands that like that's what sells a lot of times for kids that age. Like they're gonna get more sexual stuff than the rest of us really would, right? Again, like a lot of times the skill that I watch people use is like, oh crap, I shouldn't look at that. Run away. And just swipe it away. And then later, they're like driving to school or they're riding the bus. Does anybody even ride the bus anymore? But anyway, going to school somehow, and they kind of zone out a little bit. And then their brain starts to think about that again and be like, oh yeah, remember that girl? Right? And then they're like, oh crap, shouldn't think about that. And then throughout the day, they're either thinking about sex in this like get mine way, or they're avoiding it, which doesn't actually mean making progress towards thinking about sex in a healthy way. Then they'll get to this moment of they're like bored or they feel isolated or maybe they feel a little rejected about their life. And this moment like, am I going to use or not? And I watch so many kids just like, and parents even, just try to put up boundaries for this moment, like internet filters or like, I'm going to put like a picture on my phone that reminds me of love or like, I'm not going to take my phone in my room, but it's just this like boundary, but there's no actual internal change, right? Like this actual change needs to be happening here in the way that we choose to think about people and intimacy. Let me show you one of these moments. We get these prompts or triggers that lead us to think about sex. Now, there's a bunch of different kinds of these, right? But a lot of the times individuals run into arousing images that are aimed at getting their attention, which usually are then trying to sell or get attention in some way, right? They run into these things all over the place. Whether they're, again, like TikTok, we talked about like the social media life. There's like mobile gaming. Like if you guys play mobile gaming, I'm sure you've run into these too, where like you'll get these mobile gaming ads so you can get your next set of gems or open up your next chest in like Clash of Clans or whatever. And there's this like ad that's like, if you take care of this girl, you can take her clothes off, right? And they're constant. There's like tons of those. Like I run into them quite often, actually. It's shocking how many of them exist. Of course, my phone hears me talk about sex all day, so maybe I get a little more than most person. But, but like they're getting them that way. They actually see like other people who are trying to use sex to get their attention and like they're defining themselves by sex. It's all over, right? And then besides this arousing images, it could be lyrics. It could be like people listening to stuff on Spotify or whatever, which is really common actually when parents have like locked down people's access to porn. One of the main ways that kids go is like podcasts that are just audio listening to porn on Spotify, by the way. So like be half aware of that. Just like check your kid's Spotify history every once in a while and you'll be like, oh, okay, we have something here we could talk about, right? Which I'll talk about that again in a second. But anyway, I'm way off my track. Anyway, we get all these different types of prompts that lead us to think about what sex is, right? And very common reactions that I see are these. I shouldn't is very common, especially here. Again, I said like Utah, like fear culture that we've got going on. That's hot, which is funny. It's not like he's hot or she's hot. It's like that's hot. It's like so objectified already. It's not even actually a human at that point, right? There's this idea of like, what more can I find? Another really common one is this like immediately into this like self-comparison. Like, oh, if I was only that skinny, then I would be this, and just like immediately going to this like self-comparison idea, right? What matters here is what we choose to think. Do we choose to go down this lane of like justifying like it's not that big a deal or self-comparison or fantasizing about what kind of like me get mine attitude I can get? Do we avoid it? Do we do this like shouldn't game? I shouldn't think about this. you've maybe learned this about me already, but I have like a personal vendetta against shouldn't. I really don't like it, you know, because every shouldn't is enforced by someone else, you know. When I think like I shouldn't eat that donut, it's enforced by these like other people's expectation of what I think I should look like, you know. Or when I even do this, like, man, I shouldn't swear in front of my kids. Like that's kind of being because my wife is there. That's a big part of it, you know. And my shouldn't is enforced by my wife at that point, you know. But shouldn't is a fear-based thing that is enforced by someone else. And how much more powerful it is for an individual to choose to think something like, I don't want. I don't want to think that way. I don't want to use pornography. I don't want to objectify that person. I don't want to swear in front of my kids, you know? Like that's a powerful, like I can do it thought. Instead of this like, oh no, it's going to get me cower thought, right? Then the next thing, this is a huge basis of our program, is moving from I don't want to pointing out because that is something. Pointing out what in that pornography or in that image is fake. Let me give you some that a lot of my clients use. That is temporary. That is fake. That is just going to drain my energy. That will leave me feeling empty. That is just a body. That is just for views. That person doesn't actually want me, right? That person just is like trying to is just trying to get my money, right? That's a trap. That's a thirst trap. You maybe have heard that term from your kids. I don't know. That's one of the terms that those youths, you know. A bunch of these that we can point out like what's actually not real about it. Then the next step is to try to chase healthy intimacy. Healthy intimacy is something. Like what I really want is connection. What I really want is love that chooses me back. What I really want is to feel fulfilled. What I really want is sex with choice instead of it just being about me. And if some kids can start to identify what they really want and is chasing something healthy sexually, that's when the appeal of pornography goes away. Because if my view of sex is over here, when pornography shows up to me, I'm like, oh, that's not what I want. I'm telling you, no one's internet cookies has more about sex and porn than me because that's all I talk about all freaking day, you know? But every time that I run into this junk, my brain literally immediately goes like, wow, I cannot believe people fall for that. Or that's so fake. Or that isn't what sex is. And my body's not even booting up, right? Because my view of sex is here. Now this happens, right? Like I watch this happen constantly, right? Statistically in our program, like 80% of our clients that we have this moment called a critical use, where they will go to use pornography and their brain is pointing out so many things that are fake about it that they can't even get an erection to it for the men. And for the women, they're just like, I'm so mentally disengaged that I can't actually get my own body rolling. That's what we're chasing, right? Like that's what we want for our kids and the people that we love, is to get beyond just, I'm not using white knuckle power, you know? And get to this point where like my view of sex is above that. And I've lost that appeal. In fact, this kid named Brandon, who was 21 years old, texted me last night at 3 a.m. And he said, Brigham, you ruined porn for me. I tried to use today. I was feeling so crappy after my date. And I just felt like just a bunch of crap. I came home and I was like, I'm doing this anyway. Like, screw all this, you know? And he tried to, and he was like, and I couldn't. I couldn't mentally get there because my what's attractive in my brain had gotten so far beyond that my brain just started pointing out all the things that were fake about it. And I couldn't stop thinking about seeing under there that this has been watched by 2.3 million people. That here me I am, one of 2.3 million people masturbating to this one girl that's stripping. And he's like, I couldn't do it anymore. Because he was starting in his brain to point out what it actually is, right? And identifying the fakes about pornography. Now, we're going to talk about next, as a parent, how can we start helping our kids to be doing something like this? To be pointing out what is fake, again, about pornography. Again, I want you to talk to your neighbor about what stood out to you so far, and then we're going to move on. Ready, set, go. Okay. As a parent, right? Like, what can we be doing to help our kids have a critical mindset of not only just like media, but pornography, right? and like actually start evaluating what's real and what's not. The main thing is like start doing it, you know? Like media is a phenomenal option to teach, right? Like when you watch some movie or whatever, you can point out like what's real and what's fake about a relationship because it's not going to hurt someone, right? If my kid comes and tells me about their relationship and I'm like, "Ooh, dang, that sounds unhealthy." Right now it's a personal attack. But if we can watch some show and we see Pam and Jim, and all of a sudden Pam's engaged, but she's flirting with Jim, and you're like, well, that doesn't seem very healthy, you know? And you can point out them, you're not hurting anybody except for Pam, and she's all right. She's not even really Pam, you know? Right? And so, like, media is a phenomenal opportunity to point out what's real and what's fake. It's also very important because media is a huge shaper of a kid's climate on what they think is normal, right? And that what they think is normal, which obviously isn't really normal, but like what they think is normal is really shaping their perceptive of sex, their perception of sex. And it's constantly influencing their subconscious. And if we can then point out things that are fake about it, then all of a sudden our kids are being critical of their media, right? Let me tell you this story, Joe. This is this like don't skip the sex scenes thing, right? This was years ago. Like one, it was probably like 6 years ago. I did a presentation at doTERRA, and they were doing this like sexual awareness month or whatever, and I taught this huge class with this huge group of people. And while I was teaching there, we like watched Passengers, I think is the name of the show, with like Chris Pratt and the Hunger Games girl that I can never think of her name, you know. But they're in the show, and I specifically like stole off of YouTube, actually, sadly, this like sex scene, and we like put it up, and we all like there was like 400 of us watched this sex scene in this PG-13 movie, right? And it went like every PG-13 sex scene you've ever seen in your life, right? They go on this like cute emotional date, and then they have this like unbelievably passionate kiss that's just like, wow, are we ripping off each other's clothes right now, right? Then magically they appear in a bedroom, and the lights are dimmed perfectly, and this beautiful music is playing, and they take off each other's shirts. Cut. Then they're laying on top of each other without any shirts on. And then something magical happens, like the sun rises or a falling star flies by, right? And then they wake up the next morning, beautiful makeup, laying on top of each other still, covered by the sheets, just barely enough to cover the nipple, right? And so we watch this sex scene, and as we're watching this sex scene, I'm going like, okay, like let's just break this sucker down. Like what's real about this and what is not, right? And so we talked all through that. And this mom's like, I'm doing this. She was like so pumped. She came and told me after. She's like, I'm doing this. I'm like, okay, good for you, you know? And so she went home, and I found out later exactly what happened because she told me, right? But like, she went home, she watched that exact same clip. And as she's watching it and the sex scene comes, she does that little like mom chuckle, you know, like, you know? And her little girls go like, what, mom? And they're like 14 years old. What, mom? And she's like, oh, nothing, because, you know, she's got him by the hook now, may as well, like, let him struggle a little, you know? And they're like, no, mom, really, what? And so she's like, okay. So she pauses the show, and she's like, let's just talk for a little bit about sex, you know? Like, sex is the exchange of fluids. That's going to be unbelievably sticky and gross. And if you sleep in that, like, you're going to end up being, like, sticky and gross. Then imagine me putting my hand on your chest for 8 hours of sleep. What's going to happen? You talk about clammy freaking hands. Now imagine that being your ear. You know, and that just sweat, just like matting down that hair right there, you know, right? And she's not going to wake up looking like that. She's going to wake up sprawled on the other side of the bed because she's cooking, right? And then she's like, but whatever, and then turn the show back on and doesn't let her kids reprocess. Just lets them think about it, right? Like 3 months ago, I was doing a presentation at UVU. And as I'm doing this presentation at UVU, this girl, all of a sudden, we're sitting there, and all of a sudden I watch her go this, like, you know, because I'm kind of scanning her faces as we do this, and all of a sudden I'm sitting here talking about something, and she goes, and I'm like, what in the crap was that, right? And so afterwards, I sought her out, which is rare. Usually I just pretend to be in my own little zone up here after we're done, because, like, I don't want you to make you feel uncomfortable if I, like, walk up to you, and I'm like, here's the porn guy coming to talk to you, you know? But I cornered this chick, you know? And she was with her group, and I come up to her, and I was like, what was this? And, you know, and she's like, you taught that to my mother. And now every sneaking time I watch a sex scene, my brain goes, that's not real. What a freaking home run by that mom. You know? That like now, every time her kid watches a sex scene, her brain goes, what about that is real? And do you know what just happened in that little girl's mind? My mom is a sexual educating anchor. She knows about sex. Yeah, this movie pretends to know about sex, but my mom actually knows, right? Awesome. Like this using media to teach can be so freeing. And it doesn't have to be a big deal like that, you know? You can be walking in the aisle and you're like checking out at Smith's. Do you guys even have a Smith's here? You do actually. It's an old one too. It's been here for a long time. Smith's, it's like clear down on Main Street or whatever, you know? Right? That like you're checking out at Smith's and you see those like cosmopolitan magazines that say like the 10 ways to the greatest orgasm ever. And that's been their like cover for what, 20 years, you know? And as a parent, you can be like, look, this is the same cover every time. And you think if they actually had the 10 tips to the greatest orgasm ever, they would have one freaking magazine or write a book, you know? Obviously, this isn't real. It's an endless chase, right? Like, that's not really what sex is. Sex isn't all about that, right? Or maybe you're like watching a show or whatever. Or maybe you're like, you see someone that's just like the sexualized character. Then every time they walk in a room, magically a fan's blowing their hair. Beautiful, you know? And it's just like, look, like, that person is being turned into just a sexual object. And if you just said that phrase right there, you've now pointed out what is real or fake about that. Then when you see like a real connection, you know, like one time when we watch Passengers, they try to kiss each other and they're in these like spacesuits, you know, and as they try to kiss each other the first time, the spacesuits are like here. And so they go boing and it's awkward. And like as a parent, I would be like, look, like that's real, you know, like that awkwardness, like that's real. You know, like you can like imagine your first sexual experience. That's what it's like. Boom. Right? Like that's way more realistic, right? And pointing out what's real and what's fake about media. I love what this other mom does. Of course, she's a little old-fashioned that she actually makes her kids buy their songs on iTunes, but whatever. She'll let her kids buy any music they want, if they will print the lyrics and then mark what they think is real according to their values and what is against their values. And if they'll turn in that sheet, great. You can listen to whatever song you want. I just want to know that you have consciously gone through those lyrics and decided what is real and what is fake. Right? Again, I think that's awesome. Media is an excellent opportunity to teach about what is real about sex and what is fake about sex. As a parent, this is one of the things I would also teach about media. This is kind of a side note that I think is really important. We have these things called internet cookies, right? Internet cookies, they were named that because of fortune cookies, because they save little pieces of information about you, you know? And like I said, I talk about sex all the time. And so what are my internet cookies? Sex. But you have control over your internet cookies. And you can show your kids that they have control over their internet cookies. And once you show them something like this, they can be held accountable for what's on their social media feeds. For example, welcome to my YouTube page. This is always a little nerve-wracking every time I put it up here, right? But you can see here on my YouTube page, like the kind of things that I'm into, right? Basketball, gardening, Zelda. We talked about Zelda already, right? But yeah, more basketball, a little more gardening, right? This is what I do, right? I love sports, and my wife and I are trying to raise all of our own food. This is a reflection of me. This is what I choose to watch, right? I have control of this. This is, again, on YouTube, but you see these, like, triple dots right here, right? If I click on these triple dots, dang it. If I click on these triple dots, these are the options that come up. Save to watch later, save to playlist, download video, share, not interested. Don't recommend this channel again, report. If I click not interested, my internet cookies change. And instead of me getting this stuff again, it will shift, right? We talk about not just shoulding when you run into stuff. Like, this is part of that. Like, stand up to it. Like, if you're on TikTok and you run into some, like, girl shaking a booty thing or whatever, or some dude that's just, like, trying to show off that he's yoked or whatever it is, you know? Like, if you can triple dot that and say, look, I'm not interested in this, you can control your feed. This is true on YouTube, which is a social media platform. It totally is. It's got, like, all the TikTok stuff and everything else. Like, look, this thing called YouTube Shorts, this is like what TikTok is. It's the exact same. It's like 15-second, 30-second videos. And like it does the exact same stuff, right? Or like whether it's Twitter or whether it's Instagram, they all have this triple dot option where you can say, I'm not interested in this. and your feed will actually change and clean. TikTok actually is a hard press on an iPhone. I do not know what it is on the Android because Android people, I mean, come on, right? This, right? But you can control your feed. And once your kids know they can control their feed, I can go and look at a kid's feed and be like, okay, this feed is a reflection of you. In my family, my oldest kid is 5. But in my family, we do these things called cookie shares. We order cookies from Chip because my wife doesn't like Crumble, even though I think Crumble's way better. We order cookies from Chip. We go downstairs, and we're kind of weird people that don't have a TV in our house, so I have to set up a projector. But I set up my projector and Apple TV in our basement, and I put up first mine. And I'll go through my Instagram or my TikTok or my YouTube, and we'll look at my internet cookies, and we will do a cookie share. And we will all watch and laugh and joke about what I freaking like, whether it's golf or basketball, or if I want to show like some gardening thing that I'm excited about how like my chickens are going to keep my orchard clean or whatever, like something like that. And we'll laugh and enjoy each other's feed. And then my wife will put up hers and we'll watch her feed. And we do this in front of our 5 and 3-year-old. Because I want my little girl to know that one day, girl, you're going to be able to have access to Instagram. And probably earlier than most of your friends, because I believe in that. We'll talk about that in a second. But your Instagram feed is going up on the TV. And we're all going to look at it together. Because what you choose to bring in this home affects all of us. And so we all get to see it. Right? Media can be very awesome as a tool to teach with as it becomes open and evaluated. Open and evaluated. And as we can point out things that are real about that's being taught in media and things that are fake that are being taught in media. Cool. I'm going to move on from this. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, I'll take them. I don't usually do this, but Yeah, totally. Like when it comes up, I would try not to do this like, oh my gosh thing, And I would be like, I would ask them to evaluate it and that's it. Like everything, you're right. Like the goal, more important than anything, is openness, Because like even if your kid struggles, like openness allows healing, right? And like failure isn't permanent. Failure can be an opportunity for learning if there's openness. And so like for me, when I run into something like this, right, and we're watching it on there, and something shows up that they don't want to show up, or even something that shows up on mine that I don't want to show up, because it does happen. Like I talk about sex a lot, and so like on my YouTube, I usually get something sexual. I will in front of everyone go, oh, that's not what I want on my feed, and I will triple dot it and say I'm not interested in this. And I'm looking for them to do the same thing. I don't want it to be a fear-based thing. I really want it to be like, I purposely save videos to watch on cookie share night that we do once a month because like they're freaking funny. And I want it to be like, does that make sense? Okay, cool. Okay. We're going to come back to this media thing because I want to kind of fly through this progression of how to teach a kid about sex, right? And as we get closer to the end, we are going to do a little bit of like tech information, right? And I will send you our like tech progression thing, right? Because I think this is helpful to look at, which I'm making it go away now because I don't want you to look at it now because I want you to pay attention to me, duh. Like, obviously I want your attention here. Cool. Keys to teaching your kids about sex. The very first thing that's important to teach your kids about sex naturally happens if you're teaching a kid in a progression from a young age. But even if I'm starting with a 17-year-old kid, one of the very first things I want to teach a kid about is about the body, right? And there's a lot of ways that we can teach about the body. One way that we can teach about the body is by using proper terms for the whole body, right? We talked about like not creating a culture of fear. Well, when you say like wee instead of penis, like it's already being this like fearful thing, One of the first things I tell parents when they're young is like when your kid is born and you start changing a diaper, every time you change a diaper, ask your kid, hey, can I wipe your vulva? Or hey, can I wipe your penis? Or hey, can I wipe your bum? And mainly that's for you, so that by the time the kid actually recognizes you saying the word penis, you're not going penis. And you can just be like, penis, right? She just made a diamond in her butt. All of it, And it's just like so uncomfortable, And it's like, if she said the word penis to me, she would feel so uncomfortable. The only message I would receive is, well, that's bad, Or that's not good, right? And so really, proper terms is a great starting point, right? Then, as we come from terms, we like to talk about that we have private parts in private places with people that we choose, right? And my focus is that. Like, it's not that my kids never touch themselves. Like, self-touch is a really normal exploratory kid thing for a kid. But it's that it happens, private parts are in private places. And man, does that get annoying. But one of those is our focus in our home. And our boundary, I'm not saying this should be everyone's boundary, but our boundary is that we change diapers in private places. And I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old. And man, does it suck to go upstairs to our bedroom or a bathroom every time we change a diaper. But we do it because private parts belong in private places with our chosen people, right? And so when I drop my kid off at my cousins, right, and they're staying at their cousins for the day, we'll go to my daughter and be like, if you need help going to the bathroom, these are the people that we would like you to get help from. Let's go ask them to help you. And then we'll go and we'll ask those people, right? Because private parts, well, oh my goodness, I chose that light blue again. Sorry, it's just so beautiful on mine. Private parts and private places by the people that we choose. This seems early, but like consent, that's supposed to be a C. Consent really gets taught early, right? And this idea of whether or not I'm in charge of my body really gets taught early. Now, some of you may have young kids, maybe not, maybe your kids are older now, but like, that's something I really want to push, you know? Like, I want my kids to believe that they are choosers, you know? We have these friends, we've been talking about this for a really long time, and their kid is older than our kid. And this kid goes and is going into the bathroom, and her cousins are trying to follow her, and she's like, no, you have to go out, you have to go out. She is 4.5 years old at this time. And her cousins are like, no, I want to come in, I want to come in. And she says, no, this is my private time, and I'm choosing for you not to come in. And she shuts the door. Awesome, right? Like, we want our kids to believe that they have that level of choice, right? And that can be taught, again, at any level. Like, if my kid was 12 years old and I didn't feel like I killed it at this, you know what kids really listen to? A parent who's admitting that they're wrong. Kids freaking love that. If you go to your kids and you're like, you know what? I did something with you when I raised you in a way that I wish I would have done a little different. Your kid's like, yeah, tell me, Dad, how much you stink. You know? They're like eating that sucker up, you know? And at the end, you can go like, look, I wish that I would have used proper terms from the beginning. And I wish that I would have never pressed on your no. When you were a little kid and I was tickling you and you were playing and you were saying, no, 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 I wish I would have stopped immediately so that you know that no means over. And then maybe in a couple minutes we can try again, right? And that's awesome, you know? Like, I remember when my dad came up to me and he's like, you know what? Every time we talked about sex, I made a joke. And I'm sorry. I kind of made it feel like sex is something to be joked about and can't ever be talked about seriously. And then as a man, we have to pretend like we're tough, and that's not real. And I'm sorry. And man, did that stick for me in my brain. And I was like, okay, like, I can talk about sex without it being a joke, which I obviously do a bunch of sexual joking while we're here because we don't want to get too heavy. But still, you know, like, sex can be just talked about. Cool. As we move through the body section, right, it kind of cumulates. That's the right word, right? Cumulates, not culminates. Who knows? You guys are teachers, right? Some teachers. Culminates? Is it culminates? Whatever. Who got it? It culminates. I shouldn't have even asked. That was a dumb decision. This kind of builds up to the talk, right? Which still, like, is recommended around 8 years old because that's when a kid can really, like, out externally get it, and having a formal talk, and then teaching about puberty, right? Big things with the talk. One is when you, like, have the talk, if you have kids that young, don't just teach the talk. Like, if you teach sex and you end it like orgasm, it really is harder for a kid. If you'll just teach all the way of, like, body creation, the main consequence you're teaching right now is pregnancy anyway. Like, teach pregnancy. Teach, like, sex, pregnancy, birth. Like, teach that whole thing, and then maybe even a little bit about, like, nursing so that they understand the purpose of a breast, you know? And, like, if you teach it in that whole scheme, sex becomes less of this, like, holy crap, and it's just now like, oh, this is part of creation, right? If you can hit this before puberty, kids aren't, like, going like, ooh, wow, a uterus, you know? They're just like, okay, like, exhibit A fits in exhibit B and makes exhibit C, you know? They don't have that erotic response to sexual things yet. And so for them, it's very like a math problem. It's very cold and rational, you know? It's sexual in your head, but in theirs, it's not. If you can hit pre-puberty, which puberty is coming earlier and earlier, but whatever, right? Then this puberty thing, especially for women, is one of the number one indicators about how a kid feels about their body. It's what their experience was like through puberty. It's so much easier if you know what's coming. If someone just comes behind me and gives me a hug, even if it's my wife, my reaction is like, oh, who's touching me? You know? But if my wife will come and say like, hey, and then give me a hug, and I know it's coming, then I'm like, oh, wow, this is nice, right? This is the same with our bodies. If we can tell our kids that like, hey, this is coming, and then it happens, you know what happens? That kid just got evidence that mom and dad are right. This is a great opportunity for that. To be like, this is what's going to happen to your body. And then they're going, oh my gosh, mom and dad know about my body. And it starts to give more of this evidence that as a parent, you know. Coming out of puberty, this is when it's the hardest part, in my opinion. This is when we start to teach like sex as an emotional thing, about the consequences of sex, about all of these like relationship things. If I was starting fresh, my goal would be to have most of this taught by the time my kid is 14. Because you know what happens around 13, 14? A kid thinks they know more than you. And they stop listening. Like most of your teaching, like I would aim to have done around 14 years old. After that, my goal would be to have my kids work out their sexual values in my presence. So I would talk to them about stuff. I would ask them a bunch of different questions. I have a page for you that I'm going to send you. A bunch of questions about sexuality, right? And in this progression, I would start with first talking about their sexual environment. Like, do you think kids in your school are having sex? Or how many kids in your school do you think have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a partner or whatever? You know, how many kids in your grade are struggling with their gender identity? How many of your kids are like sure about their gender identity? How many kids are struggling with this? And talk about not them, but about other people, because it's way easier for your kids to not look at you for one. So like go on a drive and trap them at least 80 miles an hour, you know, but then also talk about someone else, and that'll get a kid rolling, right? And then if you want no more information about your kid, pretend to talk about their friends. So are your like friends interested in dating? You know? And now this is more real about what your kid actually thinks. Then I would ask my kid to evaluate their friends. What do you think about like Linda choosing to like go on a date with Larry? I guess Linda and Larry, you know, tons of Larrys that you know, they're young now probably, you know. But like as your kid evaluates that, they're working out their sexual values in your presence. Now, do you know what also happens there? Is they're thinking before they say anything they say, what would my mom or my dad say? And they're hearing that in their head. You don't have to say a dang freaking thing. They know you. They know what mom would say. And if they don't, they really will ask. I promise you they will. They are hearing in their head dad going like, well, that sounds dumb to stay overnight at Larry's house. You know, especially Larry, I guess, because that's, again, probably an old dude, you know? Yeah, right? But ancient, right? But that's already happening. And so as a parent, if you can just have them think about things in your presence, they're hearing your voice. And you can surprise them by saying nothing. And you will see that your values will be woven in to theirs. Again, as you hit these, like, they think they know better than you, great. If they think they know better than you, let them be the talker. Ask them about their world. And again, it's so much easier if you start with their world. I promise you, I will find this PDF that I've made where it talks about like questions to talk about their world, questions to talk about their friends, questions to ask them to evaluate, and I'll send that to you, I promise. Because I think that like really is helpful, right? Between the ages of like 15 and 18, right? Your kids are in your home. They think they know better. They're trying to be an adult. And biologically, they are programmed to separate from you. Like biologically, that's their programming, is care way more about my peers and a little bit about like my potential partners, right? But like that's what I care about, not my parents anymore. And like I'm like overly critical of them to help myself distance from them. That's literally biologically what your kids are programmed to do around this age, right? This is a phenomenal time for failure in learning. I understand as a parent that we want to keep our kids up and never let them fail. But that's the best time for failure, especially with pornography. Like, I kind of hope that my girls struggle with pornography while they live in my home. Because in that moment, they have a base of connection, a base of people who care about them, a place that they can return to where they can feel invested in and loved. Because if those kids go to college and then they struggle with pornography or isolation there, who cares about someone in college? Nobody. Like, the only reason I'm friends with you is either because you like to do fun things or because I think your sister's hot. Like, it's not a real deep investment love there. The safest place for failure is in the home. And as a parent, sometimes we try to prop our kids up from failing in the home. When again, that is a phenomenal, phenomenal place for failing, especially if failure can be talked about. Now, hidden failure is absolutely unsafe. Failure that is being hidden is not safe. But failure that's being shared is a phenomenal chance to learn and come together as a partnership, as a parent and kid, I guess not really partnership, like as a teammate thing, and then learn together. Cool. I want to do like one more what stood out to you, but when you do it this time, I expect all of you to be standing on your feet while you do it. And then we're going to do a little bit of a tech talk, and then we're going to be done. Cool? Ready, set, go. Please stand up. The real Slim Shady.
I'm sorry that the recording ends here. The next thing that we talked about was this like tech progression. And just if I was going to hit a couple like key things as you look at that like tech progression sheet that comes in the PDF, is just like opportunity for failure and a chance to keep trying, right? Like the home is the place to learn skills on how to use a screen. And so look for those places. The last thing that I hit, and I want to hit again, is great job being here and choosing to listen to something like this. Go out and start talking about this. Pornography and false sex education thrives in the dark. But as we're open and as we try, we will be successful. You could go and talk to your kids and say the literal worst things, and it would be better than nothing. Because at least the message is being sent. This can be talked about. Go, share, speak with those that you love, your kids, your partners, your neighbors, your family, and help healthy sexuality to flourish. And then we can actually find long-term success. And though our kids may fail, they'll have an opportunity to try and try again.